If you remember first learning how to subtract, you probably recall that the most difficult part wasn't going backward, it was when you had to borrow. And it turns out that that's the same thing that can trip us up when we're trying to subtract in different bases. So let's do an example here. I want to take 2, 1 base 4 minus 1, 2 base 4. Now, I'm going to start on the right, and I try to take 2 away from 1, and I see I can't do that. I see that I need to borrow. So I need to borrow one of these, and that's going to make this bigger. But since I'm in base 4, it's actually going to make it 4 bigger, and I'm going to write a 5 up here. Now, you may be saying to yourself, can't I just write 1, 1 base 4? You could. That would be the same, but it's going to be hard to subtract that. In fact, it's much easier to write the 5 because I can now just subtract and be done with this problem. But let me say another couple words about that. I can write a 5 up here kind of legally because if you think about subtracting in our regular system, when I borrow, I write a number up there that I don't have an individual digit for. I kind of cheat by writing 16. It's not that I have, think about it as 110 and 6 more. I'm just like, oh, 16 minus 9, that gives me 7. 2 minus 1, that gives me 1, and I'm done with this problem. But the 16 doesn't have its own object. Just like here, 5 doesn't have its own object, but it really is 5. So I cheat a little bit here by writing these often in base 10 if I borrowed into it. So, now that I've borrowed correctly, I can just finish this problem actually. 5 minus 2 is 3, 1 minus 1 is 0. The difference between these two numbers is 3 base 4. And that should make sense to you that 3 more than 1, 2 is 2, 1 in base 4. Because if I have 1, 2, then I'd have 1, 3. Then I would have 2, 0. Then I would have 2, 1. The difference here should be 3 steps, and indeed it is. All right, let's do another example. Like I say, what we really need to focus on here is the borrowing. If I can borrow correctly, I'll be in good shape. This time I see I'm working in base 8, so if I borrow, I will be borrowing 8. I see also right away that I do need to borrow. So I'm going to reduce this by 1 and make it a 6. And I'm going to increase this number by 8. It was a 2, so it's now going to be a 10. 2 plus 8 is 10. 8 is what I borrowed. I don't need to borrow anymore. 10 minus 5 is 5. 6 minus 4 is 2. 6 minus 3 is 3. This difference is 325 base 8. Of course, you can check by adding. You can always check by adding. You can check by changing these into base 10 numbers and then doing the math out. Let's check this one by adding quick. So I'm going to take 325 base 8. Now to add 345 base 8. 5 plus 5 is 10, which is 1, 8, and 2 more. 1 plus 2 plus 4 is 7. 3 plus 3 is 6. And that checks out. I did my subtraction correctly. All right, let's look at another example. Here I have 340 base 7 minus 241 base 7. I'm actually going to copy this down because I need to borrow a bit, and I want to give myself the space to do it. So I see that I need to borrow in the ones place, but in doing so, I'm going to need to borrow some more. I am a big believer in just borrowing what you need to do to get started and then continuing. So I'm going to borrow a 3 here. That's going to make this 7 more. 7 minus 1 is 6. Okay, now I'm on to the 7th digit. I have 3 minus 4. I can't do that. I'm going to need to borrow 1 here, and that's going to increase this by 7. Right? My base is 7, so I increase by 7. So now I have 10 minus 4 is 6. 2 minus 2 is 0. The difference here is 6, 6, base 7. One last example. Oh goodness, it's hexadecimal numbers. I better remember. A is 10, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13, E is 14, and F is 15. Okay, like I say, whenever you're doing something with hexadecimal, have those written down somewhere near you. So I want to take 7 minus C. I can see that I'm going to need to borrow there. In fact, let me just copy this down. I can see that I'm going to need to borrow to get C out of 7. So I will borrow here. If I borrow 1 from A, which is 10, I'll be left with 9. And since I'm working base 16, I'm going to increase this by 16 to 23. (23 minus C is 23 minus 12, which is 11, so this should be a B. All right, now I move to my next spot. I see that I need to borrow again, so I need to borrow 1 from this F, which would make it an E, but would also make it a 14, so I might as well write that up here. I'm in base 16, so I'm borrowing 16. 16 more than 9 is 25. Okay, 25 minus B, I see that B is 11, so 25 minus 11 is 14, which is E. Finally, 14 minus 9 is 5, and this difference is 5 EB base 16.